Yeah, what's the weather like going to be tomorrow? Yeah, it's going to be fine. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, and listeners. Here we are again.
Caught you unawares.
Pardon?
We caught you unawares there, Chris.
Yeah. Another week.
It's like the off-camera conversation before you realise you're live.
Yeah. But it's also with the thing with a watch. You know, when you ask somebody when you go on holiday, and they go, "Oh, I'm going in July. What's the weather like tomorrow?" "Oh, it's going to be okay." Yeah. Right, back with that. Ladies, friends,
Good morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, listeners, thank you very much again for those who are tuned in, for those who are going to be listening. Another week absolutely flown past, and here we are again with Mr. Dickson. And I say Mr. Dickson this week and not Stephen, because I'm going to start with something that came into me personally during the week. I'm going to read it out to you, Steve. There are so many of your episodes that I've lined up to watch. Okay, that's mine, Steve, right? I did notice that Mr. Dickson is definitely a regular, and I absolutely love listening to his views. You know, this is the bit. You know, there are some people who have such a pleasant personality that you just lap onto every word that they say. And definitely Mr. Dickson is one of them.
Wow. I thought I was going to say I thought it was going to be about you.
Yeah. So Mr. Dickson definitely isn't one of them. No. So anyhow, you've got a good supporter there, and he's an absolute gentleman and a scholar, lovely man out in the Middle East.
Oh,
and
thanks for that.
I'm hoping to get him on. Yeah, I'm hoping to get him onto a podcast soon, because he is he's a really lovely fella.
It makes doing this for almost 50 weeks unpaid quite worthwhile, Chris, when you get comments back like that.
It is, mate. It is. And do you know something? We should also give a shout out, to the aviation journalists, and especially those that focus on cargo, because everything gets kicked when they're down and everything. And these guys, week in, week out, they cover all the news, they cover the ups, the downs, but they have been so positive about cargo, which is quite right as well. So, just a quick shout out for people that I've definitely paid attention to and got a lot of respect for. So there's Alex Lenan from Lodestar, Thelma Etim from Air Cargo Eye, Reggie John, Stat Times, and Gavin Murray Media. So guys, huge respect for everything that you do. Well done. And, it's great. It's great to hear and read and learn and listen. So please continue what you're doing. Brilliant. Now, Stevie boy, so many people are saying it's going to be build back. I've been saying bring back better, not build back better, because it looks as though everything that was done before has been demolished. But bring back better. But now,
well, to an extent.
Yeah, well, I prefer to say bring back better. But now, and when you see the way things just go from one extreme to the other, it's almost bounce back better. So as soon as that ball is dropped from whatever height it's dropped, the bounce back is going to be phenomenal.
I think so. I think this week we've seen, I've seen a lot of positive news this week. Most of it genuine, a little bit of spin, of course, self-propagating kind of or self-fulfilling prophecies from those that are sort of want to benefit directly themselves by creating some positive spin and news around it. But genuinely, I think we are seeing some positive news. I think the what's been most positive for me, Chris, is the reality or the realization that the deeper the penetration of the vaccine in society, we are seeing more talk about holidays, more talk about possible travel, more talk about industry starting to recover. We do have to be cautious, of course, and Ryanair, of course, got their knuckles slapped during the week from the what's it called, the Advertising Standards Agency, the ASA in the UK, for some what we've come to expect from Ryanair, which is, let's be a little bit in your face, and actually if it attracts a few complaints, so be it. If we get slapped with a £10,000 fine from the UK's Advertising Standards Agency, big deal. What it's done is it's made the news. So good for them. So Ryanair were slapped on the wrist for saying, what was it, jab and go or something?
Yeah, jab and go,
along those lines. Jab and go, essentially saying, get your jab and fly off on holiday. Now, it's not quite like that, listeners. That is not quite the quite the the immediate response to receiving a jab. As we know, it takes some time to build up a level of immunity, and as we've heard from the scientists and medical professionals, the advice remains stay at home. And don't sort of think this is the silver bullet to restoring or getting back to everything you were doing before. That said, once I think, Chris, there is a level of the population that includes the most vulnerable and those in the first, second, third, fourth tier groups maybe, which gets it down to the 40 plus age groups, including all the vulnerable groups that were vaccinated first, and the frontline workers.
Yeah.
For genuine frontline workers, I caution or hasten to add, as you know, we have a dispute about first frontline workers when it comes to check-in agents or cabin crew. But I think there is something to be said, and countries have already jumped on this wagon. We've seen Greece responding this week already to the UK's sort of great vaccination race. And saying, once you're vaccinated, you'll be welcome. We've seen Spain responding to the UK. Spain, obviously, the UK's biggest inbound tourism market for Brits who like Spain. I think yourself and me are included in that list, Chris.
100%.
We would, Spain are saying absolutely let's work out a way to welcome you back. On top of that, we've got things like the IATA travel pass and more momentum now with travel pass. British Airways launching this week with their Verifly trial, which is the online documentation about PCR tests and records of testing and potential records of vaccination. So with all of these things coming together, I think the sum of parts, in gross terms, will mean that I think by potentially for May and June, certainly for UK leisure VFR travel, I think we'll start to see some of that coming back in the summer months. I don't think, however, just to be clear, it will not be to the levels that we were forecasting 6-9 months ago. I think there was a thought ministry of this sort of elastic band being released and pulled, and this pent-up demand returning to great levels of 2021 summer months. That were only marginally below maybe where we were in 2019. I do not think that is the case. What I do think is that there will be a material return to travel, or material return of travel, predicated on vaccinated people. That said, of course, we need the other side of the market to be vaccinated as well, to continue to protect people in country. So all very well if and the Brits are doing an amazing job. I mean, we've given them their fair level of criticism, Chris, during this process. But I have to say, even Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen this week congratulated United Kingdom on the vaccine race. They said that the UK was acting like a speedboat along the river, and she probably mistakenly, gave the very sort of analogy for if this isn't good enough reason for Brexit, then what is? By saying that the EU is much more like a super tanker. Yeah. Cumbersome, slow, takes a long time to do anything. Arguably bureaucratic at the helm and on the bridge of such a super tanker. And I think she probably put her foot in her mouth there. But anyway.
Well, I think she needed to put the foot there as well, Steve.
Yeah,
a lot of my German friends in another part of her anatomy that was long over.
Her backside, yes. But I have spoken to several of my German friends and colleagues in the week who will be listening today. They're avid listeners, I have to say. I'm not sure if they're testing me or they do listen throughout the whole thing. But really, I'm quite chuffed that the chaps are listening every week, and it's nice to hear. The point that they made was, this is a problem in Germany. I mean, not because she's sitting in Brussels, but actually this is a problem for Germany in terms of trying to get travel restored. Yep. So whilst she can use any analogy she likes about super tankers or whatever other related analogy, snail in the hair or whatever she wants to come up with. It's important that before we get too carried away with the restoration of travel, we need the EU to be successful. We speaking for the UK, need the EU to be successful in their vaccination program as well. We need Spain to get on and catch up. We need France and Germany and Italy and Greece and all of these other member nations to catch up. So there is no point sneering. There is no point taking any credit. I've been amazed at the Prime Minister's restraint, Mr. Johnson's restraint during the last week, playing the whole thing down and not wanting to
Steve, it's not
draw parallels.
It does, like you said, it does
It
no
doesn't
good.
do anybody any favors
to be sitting behind your own line saying how good you are when you can't cross over. It's pointless. And on that particular note,
well, just to conclude, if I can, just to conclude. So I think as an equal measure, Chris. The other thing, just outside of the EU for sort of a broader view about this, is we have seen the same thing being applied in Australia. All very well saying you can be vaccinated and come inbound, but until our population has got vaccinations, we're not going to allow that. And the same thing now in Thailand. They're saying in Phuket, for example, which another favored destination of many European travellers. In Phuket, they're saying that we'll welcome you back with the vaccines, but we've actually got to get some level of immunization in our community as well. So I think great in one sense, fantastic potential for domestic travel over the next few months, but I think it'll be a little bit longer before we can, in a real meaningful sense, get back to international travel.
Yeah, and then that brings it back to the global argument that everybody's safe when everybody's safe. And hopefully it'll put a lot of pressure then on redistribution and making sure that everybody has got, a really good program of vaccination in their own backyard. So that's really important.
Exactly.
Also,
yeah,
some of the things we've been talking about as well, Stephen, and hindsight is a wonderful thing, but it's a terrible person, or it's a terrible weight to be carrying on your back. Sometimes when you look back and think why, would have, should have, could have, etc. So with that in mind, it's all difficult. But the issue of people just going and traveling, okay, it has caused problems. So caused problems in Spain, caused problems in Dubai, now the GCC, even Saudi's affected now, So it does cause those problems. So as soon as people are in that rush, to open arms or to bring things back, you can understand it. But there is a strong argument now for a little bit more, I don't know whether patience, restraint,
I think,
hold back, because if you release too early, it's going to repeat again, and it's going to be more and more of the same. And people just do not want that to happen, I think. So I think a lot of people now will be behind that restraint, which makes a lot of sense now moving forward, because so many good things are happening, so many good things will happen. It just needs that little bit of hold back, and then everybody can go together.
I think you're right, Chris. I'm not generally a particularly great example of restraint. I would be the first to admit. What I would say, however, is I was on a call this morning with some colleagues in the US, in Atlanta, Georgia, and we were having a business discussion, and all three of us on the call, are known for being very avid travelers. And I said, they said, how you get on, Stephen? And I said, well, I really miss travel. I really miss flying.
Yeah.
I don't just miss the end part, getting to where I need to be. I really miss flying. Now, I'm sure there are lots of people like me that actually enjoy flying. I do a lot of work on the airplane, do a lot of watching television on the airplane. I do enjoy food and beverage on the airplane to an extent that I wouldn't generally do at home, and have not been doing in the last 11 months since I stopped flying, really. Didn't stop, but certainly for business I stopped probably 95% of my travel.
Yeah.
And the two chaps were in exactly the same boat as me, and probably like many of our listeners. But it did seem back and say, look, actually the reality is we have been forced to do things differently. We've been forced to think differently. We've been forced to operate in a different way. Most of our work before was on site. Most of our work is now off site. We are spending time at home with our families. And my son walked into the shop earlier when I was on the call with him this morning, and it wasn't sort of that BBC-esque, the guy in Korea before sort of going, oh my God, this is a disaster. It was, oh, let's say hello to Evan. Let's say, hi, Evan, how are you doing? And so I have to say, Chris, whilst I do think that we are being restrained or holding ourselves artificially back, what one has got to do is sort of then appreciate actually all the other alternatives that come with that. And I don't think we've I think because we've been suppressed, or travel has been,
Holy Mother of Moses, we've got a frozen moment. So I'll take a quick snap of that. That Stephen's absolutely frozen. I've not seen him like that, and it looks like he's doing a Tommy Cooper impression.
What happened there? You disappeared.
Steve, you froze completely like that. It looked like you were doing a Tommy Cooper impression. Just like that. Just like that.
Would you like me to keep that in the
Where did
video?
you go?
You were just concluding about your travel with the three guys.
I was just saying, look, I said, look, it doesn't have to be like letting the elastic band go and firing it off at once. You know, this can be obviously there's much better balance now, or there will be better balance. So, you know, if we all try and get online on the first day that you get your vaccine and book tickets and try to, then we know that the system will come crumbling down again, and we'll only have ourselves to blame, I suspect. So I think corporates have got to do the right thing around travel arrangements. We've got to remain to be sensible about travel. Maybe domestic travel for the next few months even if you have been vaccinated, is the right thing to do rather than, you know, jumping across borders. So I think this will come back in a different way. It will continue to harm our industry, unfortunately, because there's nothing better than I would like to see travel restored to the levels it was, you know, pre-COVID. But we know that that's not a realistic outcome from this. So better that we do it, you know, diligently and well to get the right long-term sustainable outcomes rather than quick fire and the whole thing come crumbling down.
Exactly, because we can't keep taking this stop start. And also what it needs now is it's not just restraint from everybody as individuals and the governments, etc., but it's also the negative international media and the naysayers who keep putting these ridiculous demands and pressures on. Everybody now needs to be solid, get behind it, get rid of it, and then please God, you know, open things up the way everybody wants them to. But that restraint is so important now. And you know, it's going to be tough for a lot of people, but the better it's done and the quicker we can get out of it, the better. Exactly. Now, once we do get out, Steve, there's still going to be requirements for certain controls. So whether or not it's the travel passport, and you mentioned Verifly, and you know, and people are now looking at how can they make sure that when somebody gets on an aircraft that they've had, etc., that the test certificates are correct. The terrible thing is now is the fraudulent bloody test certificates and the way people are trying to manipulate around things. That's also got to be very careful now. So this needs to come out now. So it's a real online, no tampering. You know, there has to be something now, and it's not good enough just to impose huge fines on carriers if somebody gets to their destination and doesn't have the right documentation.
Well, look, this was always going to be a problem. In fact, we spoke about this many months ago, and I compared it to the Carriers Liability Act in the United Kingdom, which there are many similar variants around the world, whereby airlines are compelled and obligated to validate and verify documentation for travel of the customer, you know, making that journey. And if they don't, if there's a fraudulent document, or there's a missing visa, or the visa's expired, or a single-time visa, or it was a sub-photograph, or it's an imposter, or whatever, any number of those reasons, the carrier was subject to fine, and is subject to fine. Now, in the UK, that fine is £2,000. In some countries, it's got $10,000.
Yeah.
So, and there's more and more being thrown on the carriers now, Chris. So the discussion I was having with the UK government, the Department for Transport this week, and some of our industry lobby groups was about something in the UK called the passenger locator form.
Yeah.
So just to be a little bit sensitive to how I phrase this, I normally don't sanitize my my output, but look, the reality is that the passenger locator form was designed in a hurry, and it was pushed out there to essentially give the UK government information about where you had been and where you were going and what you were doing there. That, in short, is what it's done. You and I have completed it on many occasions, and actually, it's an unintelligent form. There's no way for the government to filter. There's no way for the government to search. There's no way for the government to kind of. Frankly, it has not served its purpose. Now, it's a tick box exercise. Now, that's been changed this week, of course, with the advent of the red countries that we know are pushing people into hotel quarantine. Very, very difficult for airlines to filter third country arrivals. So if I'm, for example, flying from Rio to Frankfurt, and Frankfurt to London, I could well be sitting next to you that's only come from Frankfurt to London. You don't have to quarantine, you have to self-isolate. I have to quarantine into hotel quarantine. what control measures are there at the border to demonstrate to the border controller, in the UK it's called border force, but to tell border force where I've originated?
Yeah.
Well, it's self-declaration. So as well as the carrier taking responsibility, not responsibility, taking liability for completion of the passenger locator form, which is a legal document, and the passenger is also threatened with legal action for making false statements. But the carrier has to verify the passenger completed the PLF, the original point of origin of that passenger. Yep. The passenger has essentially, as well as normal, holds the correct documentation for entry. And in some quarters, there was suggestion that the airline would filter reason for travel. So why are you traveling, sir? Is that a genuine reason? Is it critical that you travel? Well, actually, I think it's critical. To go and see my wife, I think personally is a critical reason for travel. The government might have a different view because I have a house in one country and a house in another. So they might take a different view of that. What they were doing was asking the carriers essentially to be the police force or the filter at that point. And there's been massive kickback, Chris, from the community. Not only the airline, that responsibility, remember, extends down in the food chain to the ground handler. So the ground handler, somebody who potentially is paid £8 an hour or €10 an hour, earning €20,000 a year, is now charged with the responsibility to verify your reason for travel, validate that you don't have a fraudulent COVID certificate, and that you've completed all the necessary pre-travel documentation, whether it's PLFs or it's travel notes or it's embassy approvals or whatever. This is becoming really burdensome and bureaucratic, and therefore I think the advent of things like Verifly or Travel Pass is great, but it doesn't take away the liability from the airline that will in turn pass that on to down through their supply chain contracting to, for example, the ground handler. That, I think, has not been really well thought through or well spoken about. The carriers might well push back at a government level, but the reality is that they haven't yet solved for that.
Steve, it goes down even further, mate, I think, because if you look at the mask issue and expecting people who had their own shops and supermarkets and restaurants to be imposing it on people, it just causes additional conflict. So there's got to be higher profile, higher communication, much better clarity.
We saw that with mask shaming on flights, remember?
Exactly. And then they've got to start taking control. Now, the scientists have been absolutely brilliant, incredible, earth-moving with regards to what they've done with the vaccines. Now, the same sort of effort and the same sort of reception to the potential success, has to come from data scientists. So the data-driven decision-making is what it should be. And all of this open sharing of data is something now that's got to be taken on board with the same vigor as the vaccines, because as soon as all of these things are in place, and as soon as somebody can say, I just want to tell you, sir, if you make a false declaration, this is what's going to happen. It'll start making people's minds change. As soon as you've got somebody who has to say, and I've been in the queue like you have, and they say, and did you originate from this particular place, sir? And did you? And you go, you're not going to say, well, no, I didn't. That's why I'm trying to get in. You see people, and it's just not going to happen. So that level of openness now and receptiveness.
There's the old adage of making a public kind of punishment of people to try to change and alter the behaviors of others. We've done it in the airline space in a very kind of kind, generous way, whereby I'm thinking back to a very different issue, but we in Qantas and British Airways involved in some of the this is a very different issue, but cabin baggage. And you remember when cabin baggage became an issue when airlines started charging more and more for hold baggage, people thought they could bring more and more cabin baggage. So in Qantas, we decided to start tagging bags, which BA did with a yellow tag, and in Qantas we used a red cabin bag tag. Essentially, that was your authority for the bag, being in the either being in the cabin at all, or if it was tagged, it was a small bag, and therefore it had to go under the seat in front of you.
Yes.
So what that meant was you could put your large trolley bag or your wheelie bag in the locker, and then any bag with a tag on it had to go down, and well, people, oh, but they could remove the tag. Well, of course they could, but 90% of people did not. And therefore, what you did is sort of you shamed people into compliance. So at the beginning, the cabin crew and the ground staff would help manage the process. What happened by the end, Chris, was we sort of got the customers to self-police, because I would be sitting next to you, and you'd put that small bag up there. There's no space for my trolley bag, and I would say, hey, that bag's got a tag, it should go under the seat in front of you.
Yeah.
Oh shit, no, I better put that down.
Yeah.
And that really changed some behaviors.
Yeah.
To the point that the cabin crew were then doing much less policing, much more customer service interaction with the passengers, which is what we want them to be doing, and able to focus on their pre-flight safety checks and so on, all the important stuff, rather than having to manage bloody lockers.
Yeah.
So I draw sort of a proxy or a parallel to that in terms of what we're asking here. We want people not to be, and I spoke against this the other day, but we don't want policemen. We don't want everybody to be a COVID police officer. That just doesn't solve for anything. But what we want people generally to make, so particularly in the flying environment, is to make people feel more at ease, more comfortable, more. So actually, if you are called out, or if you are shamed, for falsifying declarations or documentation, or you knew that I came on the same flight as you from Rio, passing through Charles de Gaulle or Frankfurt, and you knew that I self-declared incorrectly, I think those kind of things, Chris, work far better always than £10,000 fines or threats of that kind of stuff. I think there's something to be said for fellow passengers and the fellow public. Maybe I'm sort of more in a sort of I think people are much more sort of fraudulent than probably the reality they are. But if we solve for 80% of the problem, I think you've probably got a decent kind of number. It will not be everybody that falsifies documentation tickets, but for those that do, friendly shaming amongst their peers is more helpful than law enforcement.
But people do need to know that it's being controlled, because people are not fools, Steve, and anybody who travels, and like you said, you brought out about the document, they're sitting there thinking, my God, this process is taking far too long, and what can they do with it, and what do they do with it? People need to see that there's a purpose or a reason why. So who knows, maybe there'll be more running 7-day tallies of the amounts of people who've been caught and given fines. Yep. And then that'll make people realize that, this is serious. But the main thing is there are so many things now that have to be done right, and we have to bide our time to make sure they're right, so that we don't have this stop and start. And it just means holding on to that ball a little bit longer before the bounce back. And then, please God, if there's less problems for the bounce back, then it'll make a lot more sense. And that's the important thing. Now, Stevie, okay, now we're talking about even France closing its borders now, and so many countries are going to start doing it. So over the next 6 weeks, there's going to be so many more restrictions everywhere, and everybody's going to start seeing what's happening. So again, like you said, even if the UK are way ahead of the vaccinations, they've got to be restrained in their outcome and stay at home a little bit more and enjoy being at home a little bit more. But moving forward now, the hotel quarantine. Hotel quarantine. Now, we've spoken about this in many countries, and I know you've experienced it. My daughter's experienced it many times. Some is better than others. But getting it right and getting it right on time, okay? And it's the timeliness now I'm talking about, because everybody knows if so many people are coming into anywhere and it's a little bit uncontrolled, it's going to cause problems. So now, how do you see this panning out with the hotel quarantine, which is it's still next Monday, isn't it?
15th apparently, which is next Monday. You're right. Yeah, 15th of February. That'll be 1 month after they announced it.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I am loath to sort of criticize too much, Chris, other than to say this is not new. There are many countries in the world that have been doing this already very successfully for a long time. The UK had at least 10 months to prepare for this. They chose largely to ignore what other countries were doing. They chose to make an announcement quickly to kind of, I suspect for political reasons.
Yeah. Pressure from the press.
pressure from the public, pressure from the media. Although quite why they fail, why they bend to pressure from the media or the public is anybody's guess. We don't elect the press, nor do I elect my fellow public to be MPs. I elect the government, or we elect the party. So I mean, but hey, look, electoral risk and political survival is everything, even during a crisis. Who would have thought? Interesting to see, just on that point, side note, that that the approval ratings for Boris Johnson now have climbed above Keir Starmer, I saw for the first time in months. Obviously, as a result of the vaccination. Amazing how fickle the great British public are when things are going well. They forget everything about the past.
There's a great cartoon. There's a great cartoon of that famous song from Jungle Book, with Starmer playing the, I want to be like you, hoo. I thought it was brilliant. Whoever thinks those up, they're in a different class.
He's Captain Hindsight, or as the Home Secretary called this week, an armchair general.
Yeah,
which I thought was great. Anyway, hotels, Chris. On generals, they have, and I'm pleased to see this because I'd recommended it. I'd say sort of very boldly, but we had recommended it as part of our work with the government to put a general in charge, and they put a Marines general in charge of the logistics, which is great, far better than a minister or a senior civil servant. So I do think there's some headway being made, but they have been weak at the announcements. They've been weak also at allowing people, or allowing them to pay after quarantine. Well, we can't even collect money from healthcare tourists that come for the NHS. How the hell are we going to collect quarantine money from them after they've escaped the hotel and gone off to wherever they're going? The other thing they've been very weak at is they're allowing the passenger to roam outside for fresh air or for a smoke. Yes, which I thought was mind-boggling, beggared belief. If you smoke, tough luck. Here's your chance to give up. Says an ex-reformed smoker, of course. We're always the worst, by the way. But there's your chance to give up smoking, and so you don't need fresh air. You've got a window. You'll survive for 7 or 10 days, and you'll be just fine. You can do a bit of exercise in the room. I was walking in my hotel room, Chris, 20,000 steps a day. Believe it or not, that wasn't walking on the spot. I was doing about 8 or 9 miles to get that, which was
I know, Steve. I've seen you, and I was listening to you while you were walking up and down.
So anyway, let's see what happens next week. I think a lot of negativity around this at the minute, but we'll see how it pans out. And I think things could have been done earlier and sooner, and lessons learned that were not. But now's not the time to criticize. Now's the time to kind of push on and get on with it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So James Cleverly will eventually become James Cleverly by doing things a lot faster and a lot quicker.
He's a fabulous gentleman. Lives in a small town called Braintree in North Essex, a beautiful part of North Essex, next to a small town where I spent many years in Great Dunmow, living next to Stansted Airport. But James is a lovely chap. I know him personally because of my local work for the association, the party there. But I think they've misjudged this one.
Okay, right. Well, let's hope they get that right, because we don't want any more negativity in the press, and also, people need to be a lot, as we said now, more restraint than they've ever been before. Steve, we're coming near to the end, so I'm not sure if there's anything else we should touch base on.
Only just to say, just some good news, Chris. I mean, on the back, there's been sort of on the back of the vaccine programs. I think, or the vaccinations rolling out. I think we've seen some. The last of sort of Q4 has been pretty horrendous for most carriers that have reported results already. There'll be some more to come. Obviously, EasyJet, Virgin Atlantic, British Airways, all their results are out and not looking great. However, I think forward bookings are looking pretty good. I think the next big piece of work really is around sort of how do we carry that forward, that momentum forward, and how do the carriers continue the sort of the cash management. That I think one of the biggest stories for me I saw reported this week was in terms of good news was actually the biggest surprise of 2020 was how so few airlines had actually failed or gone under. I think we probably could have predicted some more. So that in itself, I'm not saying that's great news, but certainly I think it could have been an awful lot worse, Chris. I think this is the last, January through to probably April, even maybe May time after Easter will be difficult. But there are some green shoots. It's good to see some airlines announcing some new capacity. I've seen some new regional routes opening up were announced this week, which is good to see. So I think that hopefully will continue, and we'll keep that at pace. The other thing to say was I just saw on for those that are aware of Signature, obviously large FBO operator, and the Bill Gates is now in the race to acquire Signature through one of his investment vehicles. But for private aviation, Chris, I think there has been obviously a decent demand rising, and therefore businesses like Signature will possibly do well. And I'm just looking at the report here. Looking something like £3.5 billion cash deal for the acquisition of Signature. That's in a bit of a race between Bill Gates and GIP, the Gatwick Airport and Edinburgh Airport owner, global infrastructure partner. So let's see what happens there.
But it's a clear sign. It's a clear sign where the recovery and where the focus and the emphasis is on now moving forward. I think it's going to do well. You talk about private aviation there, and we're talking about doing things right. I don't know if you've seen that article in the press with Steve Fazzano, where he was celebrating his partner's birthday, and he was doing it in his headquarters up in London. And what he did was he was doing it all video linked, but what he did was he had cutouts of their friends and relatives, and he put them on the floor in his office, and people were going past on a bus, and they looked in and they were convinced there was a big party going on.
Is that the guy that owns the Jet Centre in Park Lane?
Yes, yeah.
I've seen that chap. I was going to get a little bit personal there, but I know his ex-partner, who lovely lady. So I've seen that office.
Yeah, I would say Steve will always be surrounded by very nice partners. I think he's a class act, and he's he comes out. He, on one of the podcasts, he said something, and we were talking about it, and he said, "Why should people be ashamed of success?" And he's so right. I've never seen a poor man give other people a job. So we need people to be successful, and we need people to be positive, and not have other people be negative just because of green eyes or whatever. So anyhow, but fair play to it. Just a couple of quick mentions. Unfortunately, American Airlines are going to have some more furlough staff once the aid ends in April. That's terrible news. UA and Southwest, they've managed to avoid it by voluntary leave. For last quarter, SQ results bad. So again, Steve, I agree. I think we're getting to the beginning of the end, and it's going to be a tough 2-3 months. And then, please God, things will start to be better. Korean announced that they had an operating profit. Azul Cargo, their revenue grew 64% in Q4. So there's good signs, and like you said, there's not too many negatives. However, one point, I don't know how true or whatever, but it's something that I read in the press about Norwegian not being able to pay the redundancy monies, but they offered their staff that they can keep their uniforms as a keepsake. Oh my goodness me! If there's any sense of truth in that, that's terrible.
I think. I've seen some comments from some friends on social media, Chris, who worked for Norwegian, and I think sadly that is true. What an absolute slap in the face! What I would be
awful.
I mean, there are compulsory and legal responsibilities that they must uphold, and if they don't, then I think there's a very strong case for taking action against Norwegian. But look, as we said before, that was probably an unviable business for many years. Sad as it is for people lost their jobs, but the thing. One thing I didn't mention, Chris, or we didn't speak about, was just in terms of good news, was Vietnam and VietJet.
Yeah.
And VietJet posted a full year profit for 2020, which was remarkable. And Vietnam, I think that's testament to the fact is, VietJet, Madame Tao runs a very strong organization there. She's a very strong, powerful lady of small stature, but what she lacks in stature, she makes up for in capability and competence. So take my hat off to her, doff my hat to her and her business there. They've done a great job in Vietnam on VietJet. I think testament also the Vietnamese had managed the domestic COVID aspect very well. Whilst the borders closed, Vietnam's obviously a very large country. Domestic tourism largely continued, and that went as well. I was stumbling for my words, and I was talking about regional route expansion. I was just it was Eastern Airways that surprised us last week with their announcement into Gibraltar, which is great, from Birmingham and Southampton. Well, Eastern had historically operated small Embraer, 135, 145s, and I remember at one time it was the what was that? The Jetstream 42, and of course now they're going to start operating into Gibraltar, which the Jetstream 42 would probably you probably get a little bit wet if you tried to operate over to Gibraltar in that airplane. But I think they're going to operate the 190 in there. So good for them. So good to see small regional aviation taking off in the UK.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's good. Right, Steve, another week come to an end, and just to finish again, thanks and a lot of appreciation and respect to all of the full-time journalists and people who keep the news pumping out, letting people know what's going on, and also standing firm behind.
More facts, less opinion would be helpful.
Well, Steve, look at us, mate. That's we're full of opinions, but the professionals, fair play to them, they're standing firm, standing behind cargo. Well done, Alex, Thelma, Reggie, Gavin, and everybody else. Brilliant job.
I'd say that tongue in cheek, and not directed towards our aviation journalistic colleagues, but more towards the BBC and the like.
God, yeah. Oh my God. I hate looking at a newspaper now, because it just seems to be, let's fill it with more bad news. Terrible.
Yeah, indeed. Very good,
right, guys. Well done.
Have a great Saturday. Thanks again, Chris. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, look forward to it, mate. Take care of yourself. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks.